Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session tonight on landing the perfect internship. I'll start by introducing our panelists, and I should introduce myself first. I'm Lisa Wilson. I'm the immediate past president of APSE, and I'm an editorial director at The Athletic. Before I introduce our panelists, we have a couple other editors on the call who, when we get to the Q&A portion of this, they can certainly answer, or maybe it can be directed at some of the other folks on the call to answer this. Gary Petoskey's on the call. He is the current APSE president, and he's the sports editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer. And we also have Nyla Myers, who is our second vice president of APSE, and she's a deputy editor at the Star Tribune in Minneapolis. So I want to thank them for joining us. And now we will introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with my co-worker, Leon Carter. And Leon, I'm going by memory, so if I get something wrong here, certainly correct me. He is also an editorial director at The Athletic. He is the head of talent and development at The Athletic. Before coming to The Athletic, he was a vice president at ESPN. And before that, he was the sports editor at the New York Daily News. And Leon says his philosophy is every 10 years or so, wants to change things up and get another job. So yeah, that's where he was before he was there. And he certainly, as the co-founder of the Sports Journalism Institute, is no stranger to working with college students and advising them on internships and also hiring interns in his day. So he certainly is going to bring the editor perspective tonight of what editors are looking for when hiring interns. Our other panelist is Aria, am I saying it right? Aria Gerson. She covers Vanderbilt for the Tennessean. She's a graduate of the University of Michigan. She's had internships at the Cape Cod Times and USA Today. She's a 2020 APSE scholarship winner. And she wrote an incredible guide you should see this thing. She's willing to share it with anyone after this session, but she wrote a 4-part, 21-page guide on getting an internship, which is pretty incredible. And I'm going to start with you, Aria. What made you write this guide for getting an internship?
Right. So I wrote this guide originally, I wrote it last year in 2020. And I'd been thinking about doing it for a while because I come from kind of a weird background journalism wise. So my high school didn't have its own sports teams, and it didn't have anything journalism related. It had very few extracurriculars. I did like theater and speech and debate and things like that. I had no experience before college. I did not think that I wanted to go into journalism when I got into college. And I only started thinking that it was something I wanted to do like after my freshman year when I was working on my student newspaper. So I tried to, consult some older people who I worked with on the student paper to like help me get internships and whatnot. But it was pretty difficult, especially being from, I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is a decently sized city, but there's not any major league teams there. There's only minor league teams. There's not any like major newspapers there. There wasn't, a lot of the people I worked with on my student newspaper, like they were from New York or DC or something, and they could like have lunch with people who worked at the Washington Post or like contact the Nationals beat writers. And I couldn't do that. So it was hard for me. Like I had to do a lot of work, like the number of hours I spent trying to find listings, applying to every single paid internship that I could find. And like, I did end up being pretty successful at finding internships, but I kind of realized that there was this gap of like, a lot of places aren't really giving younger people, it's just passed down by like word of mouth. And so I wanted to come up with a codified way to like give advice that I had learned throughout this process, through all that work I did to like help others. And so it was something that once COVID hit and originally the Big Ten canceled its football season. So I had a lot of time on my hands, like last August, September is around when I made it. And so I spent the extra time that I had just like putting it together. And actually last year, I like literally I was constantly going through listings, and I was putting the listings in my guide because I know it's like so hard to find those because they're just scattered all throughout everywhere. This year I haven't been doing that because I have a professional job. I don't really have time, but I just, I just thought it was something that there needed to be, because there's so much gap in terms of, especially people from underrepresented groups, whether that's people from smaller schools, people from schools without journalism programs, people from lower socioeconomic status, from rural areas, like people of color, women, whatever, underrepresented group it is. Like, it's so hard to get all this knowledge, this institutional knowledge, that like I had people who had done internships in high school at my student newspaper, and I felt like I was so behind. So my goal was really just to try to like help other people to be able to have that same knowledge, because I really don't think it should be something that should be proprietary. Like, this should be something that's out in the open. Especially since, I'm really passionate about diversity in this industry. And so like, I think that, it should be more accessible. So that was really my goal, was to just make that info like more accessible, and to kind of help other people to like to learn some of the things that I did when I was first starting the process.
Got it. And obviously we can't talk about the whole guide, but I think we can kind of maybe just hit on some of the highlights as we're going here. But we can do that throughout this Zoom. And I'm going to open up the floor for questions very early here, because this is really what this session is all about, for you to ask questions about finding internships, what editors might be looking for. So I'm just going to turn it over to Leon very quickly. And after that, I'm going to open it up to the floor to answer questions. And we can also come back to the guide at points during the night. Leon, interns. When you're an editor, what are some of the things you're looking for when you get a stack of internship applications? What are some of the things that make an intern stand out when they're applying?
So there are a few things. The first thing that I pay close attention to is the cover letter and how you present yourself in that cover letter. And there are some buzzwords that can either turn me on or turn me off. And one of the things that I look for, one of the things that always gets my attention is when someone say, I have a passion for sports. Well, I already know that, or I already expect that, because you are applying for a sports internship. I would rather for you to tell me in your cover letter, I would like you to explain what that passion is. But when I see that word, I have a passion, I watch this, I watch that, it always eats me up, because I want you to show me what that passion is. To give you an idea of some of the people that I have hired in the past, I remember there was a kid from Michigan State. I think Aria said she went to Michigan State. There was a kid named—
No, I went to Michigan. But...
Oh, but that's a big
Scandal.
I'm sorry. But there was a kid named Om Youngmisuk who went to Michigan State. And as a freshman, every holiday, every vacation, he will look and he will see. So he grew up in Maryland. So on holidays, he's back home in Maryland. So he's looking around the DC area to see if there's a college basketball tournament, if there's a football game going on. Then he will email the sports editor and say, hey, your team is here. Do you need help? Do you need a stringer? And many times they said yes. He did the same thing when he was at Michigan State. So he gave up a lot of his holidays and a lot of his vacation time just to string. And then at one point, he had editors calling him, because I remember George Solomon of the Washington Post called him. And so when it got around to getting an internship, the passion was already there. And that's one of the things that I say that I look for. Don't tell me, show me. And Om went on to have, I think he had 2 internships while he was in school, 2 internships when he was, after he graduated. And I'll say the story and then I'll shut up. I remember I think I was deputy sports editor at the New York Daily News at the time, and we had the New Jersey Nets position open. And we had interviewed a bunch of people. And at that time, Ohm was working at a smaller newspaper. We had interviewed some veteran people, and we weren't quite sold on them. And then Ohm came in and blew everybody away. He talked about his passion, but he showed what he had done. Here's what I did on my Easter break. Here's what I did on my Thanksgiving break. You know, that led to internships. Here's what I know about the NBA. In short, he was worth taking a shot on. So you basically look for people who really want to work in the industry. And one of the things that I would say to young people who are on the line now, you know, the other thing that I often hear is someone says, I want to be Stephen A. Smith. That's great. But do you know, you should say, I'd like to know how Stephen A. got into business and what was the path that he took. You want to go back to the tuna fish and Kool-Aid days, which he often talks about. And you want to go back to the days where he was a reporter at a smaller paper, mid-sized paper, New York Daily News, Philadelphia Inquirer. You want to go back to the days where he was breaking stories. These were days long before ESPN. But so often we look at the end game. You can aspire to be Stephen A. Smith, but also look at the process that it took Stephen A. to get to where he is today. So that would be my advice for young people. We always look at the end. Let's look at the beginning, and then let's look at the process. And if you want to be Stephen A. Smith, yes, you can be Stephen A. You want to be Claire Smith, yes, you can be Claire Smith. You know, others in the industry. But look at the process. None of us got to where we are today without going through the process.
Yes, indeed. Before I open it up to questions, just want to talk a little bit more about Aria's guide as you're thinking of questions. I said it was 4 parts and 21 pages. It's very detailed. It talks about cover letters, as Leon mentioned. It talks about the interview process. It talks about clips you should send in, but it also talks about things like finding housing and living on a budget when you're an intern. So she can give you any kind of advice you're going to need as you're kind of pursuing these internships. And once you get there, you know, should you pitch stories, Aria and Leon both be able to speak to that. So I'm going to open it up for questions. And if you have a question, unmute, give us your name and your school, and then your question, and you can direct it at either panelist, or you could leave it open for, you could say whichever panelist wants to answer, or if it's a specific question for Aria or Leon, you can address it to them.
I guess I will start. Can you guys hear me fine?
We can.
Okay, awesome. I'm Ben Kreider. I go to Oklahoma State. I got a question for you, Aria. You said you made this pretty big guide. How many internships do you think you actually applied for? And then how many did you actually have the offer with?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think it's really important to get a sense of the scale here. So my sophomore year, I didn't apply to that many because I only really started applying in like December, and I only applied to internships that took sophomores. So I applied to maybe like 8 to 10, and I only did 2 interviews and I only got 1 offer. That was the Cape Cod Times. That was the internship that I did. My junior year, so I started applying like in September, and I applied to probably like 10, 15 that had September, October, November deadlines. I ended up I was accepted to the Awesome Scholars Program through the Association for Women in Sports Media. I was accepted to that in November, and I really wanted to do that program, so I stopped applying at that point, and I didn't apply for any more. But if I had kept applying, like I would have just kept applying if I hadn't gotten one. But again, that was at the time, that was the only offer that I had gotten. And then my senior year, I actually applied again. I applied to a bunch that had like October, November, December deadlines, probably again, like 15. I actually got 2 offers and I was deep in the interview process for a third. I ended up choosing one of them, but then I actually didn't end up doing that internship because I got a full-time job in May. So this is really like, I applied probably throughout my college career to like 40, 50 internships, that some multiple times. Like there is internships I applied to 3 times, I got rejected all 3 times. So it was definitely like, you know, just because somebody's getting an internship, like they might have applied so many times and that might have been their only offer. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And that just because like one editor doesn't, you're not what one editor is looking for, doesn't mean that you're not what other editors are looking for, because some people prefer like a specific thing and you might not have that thing, but you know, you might have what another editor does want. So that's just, like I said, one of the things I say in my guide is to like cast a wide net and to apply for a ton of different internships. Because like I loved working at the Cape Cod Times. That was a paper that I had never heard of until an upperclassman on my student paper said, Nicole Auerbach did this internship, like you should apply for it. And so I did. I'd never been to Cape Cod before. I barely knew what the Cape Cod League was. I loved that internship. And so I think that, again, you should cast a wide net and just apply for a lot of stuff, because that's how you get your best chance of getting one, is if you just apply for a ton of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you.
I have a question. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cullen Davis. I attend Alabama State University, and I would direct my question to both Aria and Mr. Carter. What are some key things or things you keep in the back of your head when trying to stick out that's not too cliche? I know we all kind of want to be in the same field, so it's kind of sometimes difficult to answer a question and not seem the cliche. I know Mr. Carter talked about passion. So what are things you guys both kind of kept in the back of your head dealing with that?
Go ahead, Aria.
Okay, so I was really big when I was applying for internships on really personal anecdotes and stories. I would come into both, I would craft my cover letter. My very first cover letter was about how, like my sophomore year, the one that got me the Cape Cod Times internship. So my freshman year, I covered softball for our student newspaper. I went to Madison for the Big Ten tournament. The game ended up getting delayed for 6 hours because of rain. And it started at like midnight. Like the game literally started, like the NCAA had to like get both coaches to agree to play it that late because it was like against the rules. It ended at 2 o'clock in the morning. Michigan lost to Michigan State, which is not what was supposed to happen because Michigan had won the Big Ten regular season that year. I went out to the bus afterwards. I was the only reporter there, and the coach came out and she flat out apologized to me. Like she was like, I'm sorry that like you came out here to see that. And, you know, it was like, I got back to my hotel at 3 o'clock. But I think that was a very formative experience in terms of both the power of showing up in developing relationships. And also just when I was like, you know, that the fact that I didn't mind that I was like doing that I might want to do this as a career. So I built my cover letter around that anecdote. And when it's a personal story, it's not cliche because nobody else had that story. And so in interviews too, I would come up with a lot of personal examples that would exemplify, you know, my answer to the question. Like I would very specifically be like, okay, this is my approach to beat writing. This is my approach to features writing. Like very specifically, like know what your answers to those questions are going to be, instead of just talking in, oh, this is something I love. Like say, I knew I loved this when, and then give your, you know, personal story. And then that kind of makes it not seem as cliche.
So my answer to, what did you say? You went to Alcorn? Cullen?
No, sir, I go to Alabama State.
Oh, Alabama State. Good marching band. So I have like 3 or 4 things, and some of these also apply when you're going for your first job. So one of the things that I do is I'm looking to see how much you know about the place that you really want to intern. For example, you should know something about the paper or about the media organization that you want to work for. And also when I interview people, I strategically ask specific questions just to see what do you know. Say, for example, I may say, when I was at the New York Daily News, I may say, well, what do you think about the back page headline today? And you may say, I didn't get a chance to look at it. That's a strike in my book. You know, if there's a big story that is going on, say, for example, if we were talking today, I may ask you something about one of the, big NFL games yesterday or last night, or I may ask you something about the Yankees Red Sox game, and what did the Yankees do? I will not ask you something that is so obscure, but it would be something that I think that you should know. Sometimes I would throw out a question out of the blue just to see if you know something out of sports. I may even throw in an R. Kelly question today. What happened to him? Because journalists should know a little bit about everything that is going on. And now so let's just say you have been interviewed for this internship. Here's what you need to do. You need to send a thank you note to whoever interviewed you. You may want to send off a quick email, but write a personal note. You have to remember that these professionals took time out of their day to either take you to lunch, to talk to you. And a lot of times people get an edge. That's what you were asking about. A lot of times people get an edge by what they say in the thank you note. And here's another thing that I learned along the way. One sports editor said if he didn't get that note in 72 hours, he began eliminating people. And another sports editor said to me along the way, now this goes, say, for example, if it's an in-person interview, I always ask, this person told me, I always ask the secretary, what do you think of that person? Remember, it's the secretary who booked your trip, took care of your airfare, and basically has a read because they deal with a lot of people, or the admin person, or whatever they, whoever is handling that. And this person says, I always speak to, almost dropped my iPad there. I always ask the secretary for a read on the applicants. So when you go into the office, always thank the secretary, always speak to the secretary. Some people go in, ignore the secretary, and they don't know the important role that that person has played there. So just keep in mind that you are being observed from A through Z. And if I have only one job to offer, usually there are 3 or 4 people who qualify for the job. I just have to pick one. But I'm going to pick the person who basically did something that stood out, who said something that stood out. And please do not be late for the interview. Get there 15 or 20 minutes early, but never be late, because you're being observed for everything that you bring to the table.
I have a question.
Responses.
I have a question for Mr. Carter.
Yes,
my name is
sir.
Jordan Reynolds, and I go to A&T here in Greensboro. And so
Aggie.
what makes a right, Aggies do. So what makes a competitive candidate? So what have you seen that said that you told yourself like, oh, wow, he or she is spot on, in any application that you have read?
Well, I think you're looking at a little bit of what I said about OWN earlier. You're looking for them not to say that they are passionate. You want them to show. You're looking for things in the cover letter that makes them stand out. You know, one of the things that I tell people, if you're interested in a particular place, you don't have to bombard them with 10 clips. You just wrote something this week, and I forgot who A&T played this week, and I forgot if they won. I know they won, I think.
It was Central and we won. Sorry.
Central.
Oh, that's right. It was a big game against one of your rivals. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
You want to, you want to, if you wrote something that you're really proud of, fire off an email to that editor. Don't wait until, say, for example, when editors are looking at applications in January. Say, if you're interested in paper A or digital A, find out who the hiring manager is right now. And along the way, say, I'm Jordan. I am interested in working for you next summer. I will be applying, but I would like, for now, I would like to send you this story that I'm really, really proud of, and give me some feedback. I think, you want somebody who really wants it, and the candidate who really wants it is going to stand out. You're going to have a whole bunch of candidates, but you're looking for a person who showed a lot of poise. I remember when Malika Andrews came to ESPN, the word that I heard from people who talked to her, she showed a lot of poise. That poise we have seen in interviews since then. You're looking for somebody that who you think can actually tackle a tough subject, and they can do it with a lot of poise. And one of the things that I will also say is, there are people in the industry we all admire. Most people you send an email to or a DM to saying that I am interested in the profession, I would love to talk to you when you get a few minutes, most of them will take time and talk to you. It may take a week, but they'll get back to you and try to glean something from them. What should you do and things like that. Usually, how do you stand out? It could be a small thing. Your clips are sharp. Everybody's clips are sharp. You came to the office looking sharp. Everybody came to the office looking sharp. You said something about an article that was in that publication, and you said, that article moved me, and this is the type of stuff I would like to do for you. It's going to be, just think we all are even here. Now, what can I do in order to stand out? And I mentioned the secretary, I mentioned writing a note. Personal notes are so important, because emails, editors are going to get bombarded with a bunch of emails, and they're going to log on in the morning. And first of all, you got to read the ones that came from your boss. You got to read the ones that are problematic, means that there's an issue going on. And then you read the ones that came from the outside at some point during the day. But if you send a personal note, it's going to land on my desk, and I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on that note. I personally, everybody who writes me a note, I display for at least a couple of weeks. I just either put it on my desk or refrigerator or something, because that person thought enough of the position and enough of the time that we gave them to write a note. We live in a society where everything is now, quick. And then a minute from now, we have moved on to something else. Do not overlook the importance of taking time to write a note. A DM just doesn't, everybody writes a DM. Everybody writes an email. do the personal touch, write a note. And that could be the thing that distinguishes you from somebody else. It could be the thing that an editor, and I'll shut up after this, could be the thing that an editor remembers about you that stands out that he doesn't remember about another candidate.
Before we go to the next
Thank you.
question,
Really appreciate that.
before we go to the next question, Gary or Nyla, anything to add to that about competitive candidates and what makes a candidate stand out when you're looking through resumes for internships?
Sure. Great answers by Aria and Leon. Obviously, from the writer standpoint, from the candidate standpoint and the hiring editor standpoint, I have interviewed too many intern candidates to remember how many, well over 100. I think that I'll just compliment a couple things that they said, as things that I look for. And I think one of them is, this is a digital age of publishing, and I like to see writers who understand a little bit of the digital language, because that's what's going to help them, and that's what's going to help me. I like words like SEO and multi-platform and multimedia and audience reach and things like that. Not doesn't have to be exact words, but I like candidates who understand where the business is right now. It's a good indicator of, I think, how much they're paying attention. And I really like to see what they can do for us as much as it is for them. Like, to me, when you are applying for an internship, your mentality should be and always be not who you are, but how you can help the newsroom that you're trying to get into. And I think that's the thing that will impress an editor the most. It impresses me the most. I'll just stick with me for now. That you're going to do something. You're going to come in and you're going to make me happy I picked you. You know, here you are, first couple days, first couple weeks. Look at all this person is doing. Good choice. And I think you have to be able to see that in your mind's eye a little bit as you are talking to a person. So that's another thing I like. And one more thing I would say is, especially for college students, I often get this question, you know, what should I be doing? What should I be doing right now? And I always tell them, just do great things. I'm not a big fan of people when they become seniors saying, oh, I'm going to be the columnist now for the paper. You know, I'd rather them let someone else be the columnist and work on some great stories and write a story that will surprise people, that really will engage readers and really be impressive. So I would say when you're in college, try to use the resources you have, sort of this platform you have, being able to join a newspaper or join a website or whatever it is at your school, and to tell stories and do reporting and learn how to make these stories really digital friendly, how to reach new audiences, how to engage audiences, and you know, those are the kind of things that can tell an editor who's hiring an intern that person is worthy of that internship.
I have a question. And this is for anyone who wants to answer. I'm Charlie Major. I go to North Carolina A&T as well. I wanted to know, when would you guys say is the best time to apply for internship? Because I know like it's always competitive, but like, would you say there's a time where you're hiring more than other times? Like, I know during summer, I know that there's a lot of internships happening during the summer and stuff like that. So when would you like recommend that we start to apply?
Well, so when I was doing listings last year, because I found like a ton, they're really throughout the year, but what you see is that most of the really big names, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, like the Seattle Times, all of those, like they open their applications in like September. But then you continue to get, like I used to say, there's the November 1st deadlines, the December 1st deadlines, the January deadlines, and the March deadlines. Those are the 4 main periods. And so if you apply for those that are in the October, November period and you don't get them, then you can continue applying for the ones that, you know, have December deadlines. And if you don't get those, you can continue on to the January ones. Like when I got the Cape Cod Times, that I applied to that in like January or February. It was like pretty late in the year. And there's still places that are hiring all the way through the year up until like March. And so you can really find an internship at any time in the year. I kind of like, there's pros and cons to being spread out because, you know, on one hand, it's like so many months that you're potentially dedicating to this. But on the other hand, you know, I was telling how many internships I applied to. Instead of applying to like those 20 places all at once, it was kind of like I did a couple, you know, one week, and then I do a few more. The next week I do a few more, you know, based on the deadline, when the deadline was. And it's really just like, I made a list that was helpful from like all the internships I knew of. Like I would search them and I would like have their pages bookmarked, and I would say like, okay, when's the deadline? I made a Google Doc, October deadlines, November, December, January, etc. And I like put them all in. And so then I would tackle them like in order of when their deadlines were. And so, yeah, it's really throughout the year. You can start, I mean, you can start looking into them now. There's places that have opened their applications now, but throughout the year, you know, if you don't get one like in September or October, there's still like a ton of opportunities that are still out there if you keep looking.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that don't think that all internships are in the summer. There are fall internships. We've had students who have gone on an internship in the summertime and gone on another one in September. And Aria is right. Applications probably just open for summer internships in 2022, but it is always open. And all you have to do is contact the different media organizations about their deadlines and apply. Gary, I just want to just go back to one other point. Gary got into the social media thing, and that is so important. And the other thing that I would like to add to that is, you know, when I see applications today, many students already are doing podcasts. Many students are already, you know, they know about Snapchat and all the different social media things. And all that is great. But so 2 points here. There are things at your college campus that can help prepare you for your internship. The worst thing that you can do is go to class, write a couple articles for a class, and then try to apply for an internship. You know, when I was a student, the first day on campus, I registered for my classes. The second day on campus as a freshman, I joined the student newspaper and stayed with the student newspaper until graduation day 4 years later. Also worked for the student radio station. You know, you're in college for one reason, and that is to get an internship, and an internship is going to help you get a job. So start taking advantage of things that are on your college campus. And just one more point, which is very, very important. Your social media page. Many hiring managers they work at companies that do two things. They do a background check on you, and then they do a social media check on you. So there have been people who have turned off hiring managers based on what they have on their social media page. So one of the things I tell students at SJI, clean up your social media page. We as journalists have seen athletes get tripped up in a big moment because somebody called up something. In their moment of glory, well, here's what this person said 3 or 4 years ago, and the person forgot about it. Clean up your social media page, because if somebody sends me an email who wants to talk to me, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to their social media page and see what I can learn about this person before I set up some time and give them 30 minutes of my time. So let's say I go to your social media page and there is something there. And one of the things that I tell people, no one, we live in a society where people feel that they got to comment on every blasted thing. We live in a society where people feel that, they can rip journalists. Well, you may be ripping someone at the place that you want to work. And you may have done it 2 years ago and someone did a background check and it showed up. Clean up your social media page because that's one of the things that people look at these days.
Hello, Aria, I had a question for you. So I'm actually starting to apply for some of the internships play-by-play for the Cape Cod League for the summer. So this is a pretty specific question, but I guess just in general, how do you kind of start looking for housing once you secure that internship? What is searching for housing and transportation, stuff like that like?
Right. So I do think it depends on the location a little bit, but the very first place I always look when I move to a new city is Facebook. Search on Facebook, name of city, housing, Nashville housing, Washington, D.C. housing, New York housing. There's probably going to be like 3 or 4 groups that pop up, join all of them. And there will be people who are trying to sublet, people who are trying to, find roommates or whatever. Like that is the best way to find short-term listings is on Facebook. Now for the Cape Cod, that's a little bit harder because of, the vacation aspect of it. I know a lot of people had success using Airbnb. You can also ask people at the organization, whether ask people at the league, ask editors at the paper, whatever, if they have any leads, if they know any places that people have stayed in the past, or they know people who are, I know, in Cape Cod, a lot of places will host people. So if they know anybody that's hosting people, and, you can look at, some people have looked at Craigslist. I never really used that option, but it is an option that you can look at. There's really, there's a lot of different ways that you can approach that, but those are definitely my main suggestions. Facebook groups, ask people at your org, Airbnb potentially. And you can also ask if you know former people who worked there at that organization or in that city. You can ask them where they stayed. You can ask them which areas are the best to stay in and things like that. I think that's a really good resource as well for finding housing. Especially if you're on a budget, I think people are pretty receptive to that. If you speak to an actual person, don't be afraid to reach out.
Thank you.
Everyone, I actually had a question. That's okay. I saw Ms. Lisa about to say something. Everything okay?
Oh, go ahead. You go ahead and get your question in. I'll say it after.
All righty. How's everybody doing? My name is Garvin Collins, and I go to North Carolina A&T State. I actually had a question that's more of an open-ended question, but I think some of you guys kind of touched on it as we went. In terms of experience on resumes, what looks good to an editor that we do while on campus? Because I know right now most of us are living in a COVID kind of situation. Even though we may be on the back end of it, I think we're still trying to figure out how to kind of beef up our resumes in that kind of sense in terms of experience. So what looks good to you all?
I would just like to see some of the work that people have done. Last year, we had students, when we looked at applications at SJI, it was a year where we had, some of the applications were a little bit thin because of the virus that was going on. But there were still there was still the people who stood out. I did not see game stories because you couldn't go to games. But what I saw was, I saw stories where people actually interviewed athletes on campus. How are you dealing with the virus? What does this mean for your spot in the NFL or something like that. You know, people found ways to do stories. And not only that, how people were coping. You know, so I look for, there's always stories to do in your hometown. You know, even when people went back to their parents' home and they work remotely, there was always a story there that they could do. So I'm looking for some enterprise. What I don't want is someone who didn't do anything during this particular period. So, you know, but right now sports has returned, so we don't have that excuse. So just get out there and start reporting, you know, start doing some freelance work on the, now I'm gonna try to guess the A&T paper. Is it the A&T Register?
Register, yes, sir.
Oh, that takes me back 30 years when I saw the student newspaper. You know, do you work on your student newspaper?
I do not. I'm actually part of the marching band. I heard you kind of talk about Alcorns a while back. But yeah, I'm a part of the Blue and Gold Marching Machine, and we're still trying to figure out how to balance band and a whole lot of other things. That's why I was kind of asking.
If you're in a marching band and trying to work on a student newspaper, that's going to be very, very tough because the A&T marching band does not play, as well as 2 or 3 others that I'm a fan of. That's going to be a little bit tough, but band season ends in December, right?
Yes, sir.
So next semester, start working on your student newspaper or radio station, start doing some freelance work. I mean, have you done a story about the long hours that you guys put into marching? I mean, have you done a first person piece on life as a member of the marching band?
It is actually very funny that you asked that. I'm actually in works of a podcast where we're discussing how we balance our band lives and our academic lives while also trying to enhance our careers because we're still college students. We're still trying to be great in band, be great in school, but also put ourselves out there to be able to network with other people to where we can get fulfilling careers. So that's exactly what I'm working on at the moment.
Podcast is great, but I would like to see a written piece that goes along with that. You know, because I mean, I know what it takes that goes into some of these marching bands and what goes into Saturday afternoon performance. So let's do a written piece on that and the long hours and band camp and exercising and whatever else you guys do. And is there going to be a GHO this year?
As of right now, yes, sir. It is on schedule to go on the football game. Absolutely. So we're in preparation for that as well.
Those who don't know what GHO is at A&T, they say now they have the greatest homecoming on earth. You go talk to someone at Howard, they will shoot that down. So we'll just leave that alone. We won't get into that. But there's so many stories that I think you could do even if you're in a band that you should look at, and the preparation and things like that. You know, first person pieces can be very good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I want to add too that I think it's important to know that, you know, not everybody does have the same opportunities, but it's really important to take advantage of whatever opportunities are available to you. So from my perspective, Michigan did not have a journalism program. I was not a journalism major. I just worked on the student newspaper. And then also it was very difficult to get freelance work at Michigan because every newspaper in the area had like 4 beat writers already. And the freelance positions that they did have were very extremely competitive. We had 40 sports staffers on our student newspaper, and a lot of them wanted freelance positions. I had a few, but not nearly as many as I wanted. But what I did do, I really decided like I covered Michigan football, and I was like, I'm gonna really like do this beat. I'm gonna do a ton of enterprise on this beat. I wrote a ton of features that like nobody else was really even the professional people, you know, weren't writing the amount of features that I was in my junior year of college. And then another thing that happened was I wanted to be sports editor of my student newspaper, managing sports editor. It ended up not working out, but I think that that allowed me to do was, first of all, I was able to really concentrate on reporting projects that I was really passionate about. I spearheaded a Women's History Month initiative for our student newspaper that was like women on the section writing feature stories about women in sports. I actually wrote a profile of a woman who ended up winning an Olympic gold medal. And my story ended up getting republished on the front page after I had graduated with an editor's note. She won an Olympic gold medal. And then I joined the audience engagement section, and I started doing a ton of like social media. I planned social media campaigns for our sports social media account. And I got a ton of firsthand experience doing engagement work. And that engagement work that I did actually like really helped me to get a job, because it was like so many other people have mentioned that, you know, digital skills are really important, and having, you know, worked on that side of it, editors, you know, liked that. And so if you try to go one path and it doesn't work out, you know, that doesn't mean that it's over for you, but it's just a matter of finding a path that you can take where you are working hard and you are passionate about what you do, and you're just taking advantage of all the opportunities that do come your way. You can find a way to be successful. And if you can find a way in the interviews to frame your experience, where I said I had this very specific approach to beat writing. I wanted to be a beat writer. I wanted a beat writing job. So going all in on my beat coverage was a good idea for me, because that's what I wanted to do in the future. I could say I have all this experience with beat writing, and, you know, the engagement experience to go along with that. And I was like, you know, this is how it helped me with beat writing. If you figure out how to frame your experiences in such a way of like, this is how this, you know, it helped inform my, you know, desire to be a beat writer or a features writer or, you know, high school writer or whatever it is that you want to do. I think that that's really important as well. I think it's tough. I don't think that students should get, because I say this because I did, but don't get caught in the trap of thinking that there's only one way to be successful, or that, you know, you have to hold X or Y title, or you have to do this or that. There's a lot of different ways to be successful. It's just a matter of working hard, loving what you do, putting a lot of effort into what you do, and being very intentional about what you're doing and how it's going to inform your future career.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
These are all great questions. Before we get to the next one, Jake, are you going to have the list of internships in the October newsletter? The link, are you planning that? That we've run from time to time?
That's a very good question, and I did not think about that one, and we will try and put one together as soon as possible, even if we just blast it out as a separate newsletter. We can do that.
So that's a good segue for me to say, you can use the chat. I know some of you already get our newsletter because you're members of student chapters, but we have some folks on here tonight who aren't, because this was open to all college students. So if you would like to get APSE's newsletter, put your name and your email in the chat. And if you'd like a copy of Aria's awesome internship guide, also put your name and email in the chat, and I'll get with her when I'll compile a list for her. We'll make sure anybody who wants a copy of that receives one, as well as is subscribed to our newsletter. And then we can go on to the next question.
I have a question. So I actually did write an article for the A&T Register that got published last week, but it didn't have anything to do with sports at all. So I was just wondering, like, when people are applying, do you care more, like, if their portfolio or whatever has more to do with sports, or do you like to see when they write about other things too? Does that like persuade you in any way?
I like to see a variety. Certainly, if you are applying for a sports internship, I want to see a majority of sports clips. But I would love to see a variety. You should have a news clip. You should have a feature story. You should have 2 or 3 game stories. Versatility is the key. I like a well-rounded journalist. So say, for example, you ended up doing a very tough news story that appeared on page 1. I would love to see that in your clips, because that shows me that you can actually handle a tough subject. So you should not send like 10 game stories, send 3 or 4 game stories, a couple opinion pieces, a couple feature writing pieces, and a couple pieces that appeared outside of the sports section. But if you're applying for a sports internship, you should not send 10 news clips, because I want to see I would like to see some of the work that you've done in the sports arena.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm Nathan Monty. I'm a senior at North Carolina A&T State University. My question is directed to Mr. Leon Carter. You said earlier how you had interviewed an individual for a position. I believe his name was Ohm, and you had talked about that in his interview. He talked about his passion for his writing, and he also talked about during his interview his passion, his knowledge about the NBA. In a setting like that, what did he, I guess, specifically talk about the NBA to where he could show his understanding for the game to where y'all took a chance with him in that position?
So it's not something totally specific, but if I ask you, who do you think can win the NBA? If I ask you, say, for example, do you think what's going on in Philadelphia or with the Sixers? Or if I ask you, do you think Kuzma, if that deal was worth it? I just want to know a little bit of what you know. Now, in this particular case, he was interviewing for the New Jersey Nets job and also helping out on the Knicks. So I would like to know a little bit of what you know about some of the issues involving the Nets. And, sometimes you may have a connection to, if you have a connection to someone on the team, by all means, mention that. I have access to someone in the front office or something like that. So it's things like that that let you know that the person is really a serious candidate about the job. Because when it's over with, when the interview is over with, I want to feel that this person is going to give me a good chance, or he's going to do a good job. That's what I want to feel about the person. And I want that person to remove all doubts. One of the things that Dave Squires often that he often says at SJI, students should read, write, edit. Have you heard that at A&T?
He tells us that every class. Yes, sir.
Well, in the course of an interview, I want to see what you have read. I want to see what you have written. And then the other thing is, when we edit, before you turn in a piece to your editor, whether it's on an internship, whether it's at the A&T Register, edit it yourself. I always say, write the piece tonight. If it's due tomorrow at 9 a.m., wake up in the morning, read it cold, edit yourself. And you'll be amazed how many sentences that you got 10 and 15 words in a sentence that you can now edit it to 10 words or less and make it tighter. Always edit yourself, and don't turn in something that your editor will look at and they will say, this person didn't get a chance to edit. Didn't edit it, because if you don't edit yourself, it's going to end up looking sloppy. It's going to end up looking like a rush job. Edit yourself. Edit, as Squires will say.
To follow up on that as well. So what I aspire to be a sideline reporter for the NBA, like as Malik Andrews did the last year, as Craig said, used to do for TNT. If I was going for a position like that, what would you be wanting to see on, say, a resume or a cover letter experience from myself specifically?
So I would say that at A&T, you probably already have a student, a TV station on campus. Have you done any work with them?
I actually work currently on the basketball team along with the football team. So I haven't done much work with either the paper or the radio
Okay.
station or whatever else.
Find some time to do some work. It's, when you have resources there on campus, use them. And even if you are working in other areas, if you found time to do something every other week, at the end of the semester, you still have 5 or 6 pieces to show. Find time to do, to do the work. And, and since you brought up the TV question, I was talking to this young reporter earlier today, and I was telling him that I was speaking to a group of people, and I said, well, I'm probably going to get a TV question. If somebody wants to be on the air, the person said they should shadow the assignment desk, editor, producer, photographer, etc. Learn how a news operation works. That will help you do a better job when you want to become a sideline reporter. So just don't say, I just want to be a sideline reporter. Learn how that operation works and learn how it works behind the scenes, because that will help you do a better job when you do that job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a quick question for anyone on the panel. So I'm an aspiring play-by-play broadcaster, and obviously when we're sending in our stuff, we want to send in our best clips of us doing different broadcasting. So what would you say would be your advice for kind of packaging together your best clips and how you would go about that in order to put your best moments forward to your to the employer?
Well, that's not a quick answer to that. What I would say though is everything that you can do as a journalist will help you do something as a broadcaster. If you talk to some of the broadcasters today, many of them started out being a writer, and then on the side they did their broadcasting duties. So I would learn how to be the best writer that I can be, and then I would try to get a broadcasting internship. And no one is going to put you on the air right away. You may have to work behind the scenes. Have you done any play-by-play work yourself?
Yeah, I work for I work for the Big Ten Network plus Maryland Baseball Network and my student radio station. So every week. Yep. Okay, so you're well on your way. And but you're gonna try to apply for an internship. So what I would try to do is apply at a radio station or at a TV station, but you're not going to get a play-by-play internship. It's not starting out. But what your reason for doing this is to learn how that operation worked behind the scenes. When I was at ESPN, there are people who are now broadcasting. There are sportscasters at different spots across the country, but they worked on ESPN, the magazine, when they were there. They worked on ESPN.com. So everything that you do is a step to something else. Certainly as a play-by-play guy, you're still telling a story, and you're still telling the story in a clear and concise way. So I would go for an internship at one of those stations, and then just keep driving home. I would like to do this. I would like to do this. Who knows? Somebody may get sick on Thanksgiving. They may ask you to fill in. Who knows? But you're going to get a break. We all have gotten a break at some point in our lives. And one of the things I say, when you get there, begin articulating what you would like to do. Let other people know what you would like to do. Ask for some advice. Those clips or those broadcast things that you are doing now, those play-by-play things, let someone at a station listen to that and critique it. And that will help you, get from step A to step B. But I think you're well on your way if you're doing
those things now while you are in school. And I say to everyone, all the other students, there are resources around you on campus that you need to take advantage of while you're in school, because it will help you get from point A to point B.
Aria, you have your hand raised?
I do. So Aaron, I got two things for you. I'm gonna lower my hand too. Number one is make a demo reel. Have you made a demo reel?
No, is that like basically a package of all the different reels? No,
Yeah.
no.
You're gonna make a demo reel of some examples of what you do on air, and you're gonna keep it. You're gonna keep it under 5 minutes. Something that can be listened to without a tremendous amount of time. And that demo reel will have a link to it. You'll put it on a YouTube channel or something like that everybody can open up, that they don't have to log into. And you're going to put that link at the very top of your resume, because that's the job that's the internship you're looking for. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, I want to underscore what Leon said. The number one thing for a broadcast, aspiring broadcaster, is to know what everybody does in a broadcast. Come to understand what the director does, the producer, the writers. Write your own copy. Learn to do things in a broadcast that aren't on the air, and at least know them and know how to talk about them. And when you get in an interview, be able to discuss all the aspects of what makes a good broadcast. Those are the things that's the grounding, that's the reporting, that's the journalism behind being an on-air play-by-play person. That's the knowledgeable side of what you're doing. Know what everybody does, be able to do some of those jobs maybe, but know what everybody does, know how to explain the whole process, know what makes a good broadcast. And then put your best moments together on a demo reel, put a link together and put it right under your name and address on your resume, because it's 2021 and most people don't print out resumes. They read them online and they're going to click on that link if they're looking for someone in a broadcast setting, and they're going to listen to it if they're interested in you. So that's how you handle your, and you obviously have clips to give. So, take the time to do it well, to edit it well, and to have something concise. 3.5, 4 minutes is perfect for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Hey, I want to add something to when Leon mentioned that he wanted to see more than the podcast. There was a recent grad who I've been mentoring, and he had podcasts and he had videos, Q&As. All of it was sort of broadcast. It was some video, some radio type stuff. He had very little like writing. And I told this young man, I said, hey, take your Q&A, take your interviews, turn those into short feature stories. Could be 250, 300 words, but that'll show that you also can write. You may have to make another phone call or two to round those stories out, but at least you'll be able to show, 5 to 7 writing samples. So the young man did not follow through, and then a job became open, and I gave his name to the local editor who was looking for someone to hire. And the editor said, he got great stuff, but it's all broadcast. And I would love to have seen some writing samples. If I could have seen 4 or 5 writing samples, I would have hired him. And I told the editor the advice I had given the young man, and the editor said, well, if I had seen that, he definitely would have a job. So I say, I'll be blunt. Y'all know I'm blunt. Don't be lazy. If all you have is broadcast clips, turn them into some stories. Create a writing portfolio. You could write it sometime without another phone call, but sometime 1 or 2 phone calls, and show some writing, because if you're versatile, you can do it all. You're going to get hired before someone who can't do it all.
Great advice. Leon, I wanted to give you a minute or two just to talk about SJI, because we have some women on here, journalists of color, just to kind of talk briefly about what SJI is. I know you're accepting applications, a little bit about that process.
SJI, the Sports Journalism Institute, it was started in 1992. We welcomed our first class in 1993. I was on a sabbatical through a fellowship from the Freedom Forum. Al Newhart, who founded USA Today, was a person who signed off on the fellowship, which allowed me to take a year off to teach and mentor. So in 1993, and one of the things, and I would say this to all of you, when you get into a position to reach back and help others, make sure you do that. Because when I was growing up, I didn't have any journalists in my hometown in Virginia. I had to learn the craft through different ways. Didn't have any mentors who were journalists. So I don't even know how I ended up in this profession. I just ended up in it. And one of the things that I wanted to do, if I ever got into a position, was to find a way to train people in areas that we are deficient in the industry. One is women, and the other one is people of color. And SJI was created in 1993 to train students in that area. Now, if you had told me in 1993, Leon, in 2022, you will be overseeing the 30th class of SJI, I probably would have run out of the room, because I did not think I would still be doing this. But the thing that keeps me going are things like Candace at the Washington Post. Candace Buckner, who just got a job as a columnist in the sports section. And I woke up the other morning, I saw that note, and I was so proud to see that. The thing that keeps me going is when I look up on the TV on any given day, and I see someone who's a graduate from SJI, whether they are covering the White House for the New York Times, or whether they are doing the NBA playoffs like Malika Andrews, or whether they're covering the US Open, even though Ohm is on the West Coast covering the West Coast basketball teams, the Clippers and the Lakers, but he's a big tennis fan. And he ended up covering the US Open this past year for ESPN.com. So SJI was created to help open the door for young people in areas that we are deficient in. And it just thrills me when I look up and I see what some of the graduates are doing. And not all of them stay in journalism. Some have gone on to become doctors, lawyers, and they have to write a check to keep SJI going. So that's a good thing. And one has gone on to become an actor. We had one student who was in journalism for a while, but he, in the back of his mind, he wanted to become an actor, always wanted to become an actor, and landed a role on Law and Order. And that's the strangest thing, to be looking up at the TV and see one of your alums that you advise acting on Law and Order. He is now in Canada working on a news show. But SJI, and we just opened the application process September the 1st or September the 5th. We close it normally right before Thanksgiving. If you are interested, you can go to my Twitter handle, and there's a link to SJI, but it's sportsjournalist.org. Or you can go to my Twitter handle, which is Scandal Before God, which no one on the call asked me about tonight, by the way, but that's okay. And there's a link to SJI, and you can find the application there.
Nyla, I saw your hand raised.
I just wanted to get a chance to add to some of this in case there was no question that stood out. I just want to back up some things that many other people have said, and to be pithy about it, be prepared and be personal. It's very hard in this business for advice, in this very quickly changing business, for advice to still be relevant 20 years later. But I got my first job out of college. So not an internship, but a job, because of my cover letter. Because I had written a personal story about something I had done in journalism that was memorable to the people who picked my stack of my resume and my clips and my cover letter, a big pile of that I had put in a job fair. And so this goes back to Aria was saying at the very beginning, make yourself memorable and be specific, because specificity is what is memorable. Just like Leon was saying about what is your passion. I wrote a story on my cover letter about how for an internship, an article at my internship at the Toledo Blade, I was Muddy the Mud Hen for a game, and dressed up as a giant yellow chicken. That was what my cover letter was about. And people remember that, okay? They don't, and obviously I put the clip of the story I wrote in that package. And people remembered it. When I interviewed at this place, it was at the Sporting News, and they were like, you were the one who dressed up as a chicken. Like, I'm not, not everybody has such a weird story, but specificity counts because that sticks out to people. And that goes to being prepared. Leon has said this, Gary has said this. I even think for people like Garvin and people putting their packages together, if you're concerned about what is in your experience or in your resume, being able to answer questions like Leon's, what I would call case study questions, like, what would you do if? What questions would you ask in this situation? And just being prepared to answer those questions. I mean, Aria even put in the chat, know what your favorite things you've read in journalism have been. Keep a list, because you're going to be asked that. Everybody asks that. So be prepared. I can think of one specific example in an interview I did maybe a year ago. It was right before the NBA draft lottery, and the Timberwolves had the number 1 pick. And in this interview, I asked, okay, Timberwolves have the number 1 pick. How would you cover that? What would you do? What's your coverage plan? And that was for sort of an audience engagement job where there aren't really clips. There isn't like, what are you going to show me, a list of tweets? You could do that, or you could tell me how you plan. You could tell me how you create things. And that teaches me a lot about how you think, or what the work that you can do, as much as the work that you did do that you're showing to me. So just be prepared and be specific, and that'll go a long way. That answers a lot of the questions that you guys have asked, and it'll go a long way to making you memorable to people like me.
And the one thing that I would like to add, and Aria mentioned it earlier about the places that she applied, do not get discouraged when people say no, 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 when you get these rejection letters. You're going to be rejected by a bunch of people. It's just the nature of the business. You can't hire everyone, but just stay at it, because somebody out there is going to hire the person who wants to do play-by-play, the person who wants to be a sideline reporter, the person who wants to be a sports reporter. Just stay at it, and don't be, and don't be afraid to move around. When I got out of school, and my first job was in Louisville, no relatives, no friends. I grew up in Virginia. It was so funny how I got that first job. I was at a Howard University conference, and it was a 2-day communication conference. And the last interview that I had on the second day, and I didn't have any resumes and any clips. And I sat there and talked to the person from Louisville because someone told me they had an opening in the sports department. So I just said, I'm gonna talk to the person. What do I have to lose? So I said, hey, I apologize. I've given away all my clips, all my resumes. And they said, here's my FedEx number. When you get back home, overnight me clips. And within 2 weeks, I was getting a ticket to go out to Louisville. Now, growing up the way I grew up, that was my first plane ticket in my life. And I went out to Louisville and I interviewed for the job. And 2 months before I graduated, they had offered me a job on the sports desk. And of course, I always wanted to be in management. Is for whatever reason, I always wanted to go on the crazy side or the tough side or whatever. I always wanted to be a manager. But it was a good feeling to get that first offer. And I also got some rejection slips along the way before I got that first offer. But you're gonna get that. You're gonna get that. So go in expecting that I'm gonna get rejection notes, but do not let that deter you in what you want to become.
Adam has his hand raised. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Aria and Leon, Nyla, you're all talking about other sports. Sorry.
Just take your time. Take your time.
I have a stutter, so I apologize for that. But I'm a junior at Oklahoma State. I cover soccer. Well, I covered soccer last year. I covered wrestling. I kind of lead the soccer beat and the wrestling beat. I'm on my second year for soccer. I'm going to be second year of wrestling as well. Of course, Oklahoma State is a huge wrestling school. I've kind of developed a following there. But now Saturday was my first time at the football game. It's not that I don't want to cover the big sports. It's just that I prefer the smaller sports because there's a lot more stories to tell. Is that something I should be worried about, like going into my junior year, senior year? Do I need to get, should I be worried about not covering the quote unquote bigger sports because of, I feel like I have really strong clips in the smaller sports, but I just don't have, the reps at football or basketball.
Versatility.
Yeah.
I think editors look for someone who is versatile. Mm-hmm. And you should have a mix of the smaller sports as well as the larger sports.
Right.
Don't be afraid to tackle.
Because I also like last year I wrote a lot of news, a lot of lifestyle. I do podcasting, I do anchoring, I do anchoring, podcasting. What else? Play-by-play as well. So I do everything because I want to be as versatile as possible.
Mm-hmm. But don't shy away from the larger sports though.
Okay.
Don't shy away because I may have an opening for a sport in that area. So right. Don't shy away from that. I would just try to make myself as hireable as possible. And you got resources right there in school, as you have mentioned, which is one of the things that I said earlier. Take advantage of what is around you and do it.
Yeah. Nyla had a good point. What would you say to maybe because my editors, it's not necessarily that, I feel like I'm doing a good job, but my editors, they're putting me, I'm only a junior. They're putting me in the rotation of football because really the entire editorial board is going to graduate this year. Should I be worried that because honestly, I don't feel like I have their full not trust, but maybe like their full belief in my talents as well.
Then
So
that's go ahead. Go ahead.
sorry. Something I can say to that is doing good work on non-revenue sports is the #1 way to gain your editor's trust at a student paper in terms of covering football, basketball, etc. When I was briefly an editor on my student paper, and something that I wanted to see was people who were covering those sports, not just to get on the football beat later, but who actually cared about covering those sports. So you covered wrestling or covered soccer, or they covered volleyball, and they actually put their time and effort into covering that beat, into writing feature stories, into, you know, having real coverage instead of being like, oh, I have to cover this sport. Like, I really want to be covering basketball instead. Like, I noticed when people, you know, were dedicated to those beats, and it sounds like you are. So I would continue to be dedicated to those beats. And I do think, you know, like Leon said, you do want to have experience covering football or basketball or baseball or something like that, just to show that you have knowledge of those sports and that you have experience with those sports. But at the same time, you know, I covered football mostly. I also covered basketball for a little bit, but mostly football. And then I covered a lot of non-revenue sports. And when I sent in clips, I sent both. I sent some football stories that I had written, and then I sent in, like, you know, like I mentioned the profile of the Olympic gold medalist. She was a swimmer. I sent that profile to a lot of places that I applied. I sent a story I wrote about the lacrosse team to a lot of places I applied, because it was just an example of one of my best feature stories that I had written. And so I think if it's good writing, you know, on some level, it doesn't matter what sport it's about, but I do think that you want to, you know, supplement that with coverage of, you know, football, basketball, baseball, softball, etc.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your guys' answer.
I want to
I
jump
saw
in.
your hand raised. You have a point to this, right? And then I also see you, Alexis, and Ben, I'll get to you next.
Thank you.
I wanted to jump in on this real quick because, like, I'm with Wisconsin State Journal now, which is mid-size, upper mid-size paper, but for the last 7 years, I was a sports editor at a small paper under 10,000 circulation. We didn't have interns that we could hire, but I can say this from a hiring perspective and from what I wanted from reporters that worked for me on my staff, whether freelancers or potential hires or just the people on my staff in general. The advice that I give to people looking to get into this is, in all likelihood, you're not going to land your first job. And this is an internship panel, but this applies to jobs too, and internships as well. You're not going to land a job at ESPN or USA Today or The Athletic or any of these marquee companies right out of college. The odds are not in your favor to do that. And that's not to say don't shoot for the moon. Absolutely do so. But the majority of entry-level jobs that we get are, you know, the small community paper in central Pennsylvania or in Iowa, or, you know, pick your non-city location, and that's where you're going to be. I want someone who is willing, interested, and able to cover the non-Big Four sports. If you can do that and you show a passion for it, and you can find creative stories and be willing to stick to a beat, that is so much more important to me than whether or not you can handle football. Because everyone, I say this as a generalization, everyone can handle football. That's the #1 sport in this country. We all have been exposed to it at some point, especially if we're in sports journalism. I trust that someone can do that. I need someone who can go cover cross country on a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock when it's, you know, raining and cold, and you just came off that football beat the night before, so you're on 6 hours of sleep. I need someone who can go cover a girls' tennis district match at Tuesday at 2 o'clock. I need someone who can go cover a boys' soccer match at 7 o'clock at night. Those are the things that I need. And if you can do that and you're eager to do that and you show a passion for it and you get good at it or are already good at it, that is so much more valuable. When I was at Temple, I started out covering women's gymnastics and women's volleyball my freshman year. By the middle of my sophomore year, I was named the women's basketball beat reporter. I stayed there for 3 years. I didn't need to be a football beat reporter or football columnist for our student paper to land a job. I didn't need to show that I could do those things. The first beat that I had when I got out of high school or out of college working at a professional paper was to cover football in the fall. I didn't cover a single football game in college. I could cover football when I got to high school, or when I got to covering high schools for a pro paper. So yes, absolutely, be good at those other sports, be willing. I don't want someone here that says, I only cover basketball and that's all I want to cover. Yeah, good luck with that. When I'm at a small paper of 10,000 and I have 1 or 2 people max on my staff, and there's 7 sports going on in our high school area and 13 schools, you darn well better be able to cover other sports. And you darn well better be able to say, yes, I'm going to be there. And yes, I'm going to give it my best effort.
Thanks, Jake.
Alexis? Davis, sorry, there's 2 Alexises.
Yes, so my name's Alexis Davis. I think Alexis Black is on the call as well. So I have 2 questions. They can probably be answered in one answer, but whoever is on the panel. So my first question would be, so I am interested in covering basketball, but I know that that's such an overly saturated market. So my first question would be, how do you stand out in the big 3, big 4 market? And then my second question is, once your foot is in the door, because I would like to believe that my foot is in the door at my current internship, but what would you say are some things you can do to impress your editors and impress whoever you are reporting to that would make them consider you for full-time employment?
So Alexis, I think something that's really important when it comes to competitive markets. So I covered Michigan football in college, and that is an extremely oversaturated beat. There's like 100 people that come to every game. What I did is I read the coverage of all the local papers that covered Michigan football, of all the national outlets that covered it. I said, what is this coverage missing? I asked myself, what have they not done that I would do? And when I covered that beat in college, because we had a little bit more freedom than some of the local outlets, you know, sometimes professional outlets, you know, you need specific things at specific times. At the student newspaper, I could do whatever I wanted as long as I wrote a certain number of stories per week. So I tried to write stories that I thought the local outlets weren't covering. And it's funny because when I was interviewing for my current job, the editor that I was interviewing with used to work in Michigan at one of those papers. And I basically, in our interview, I was like, yeah, when I was at Michigan, I was like looking at what I thought other outlets weren't doing. And it was kind of awkward because it was like his outlet, what his outlet wasn't doing. But I do think that it helped me get the job, because that is how you stand out. It's when you're writing something that you know that nobody else has done. When you pay attention and when you can carve out your own niche in a really competitive market, and when you can have a very specific approach. I had a very specific approach to my beat. And when I interviewed, I said, this is how I approach Michigan football. It wasn't how everybody approached. There's a lot of valid approaches, but develop an approach that's your own and that's your, you know, your specific way of doing it. And then explain that to editors and tell them, this is how I do it, and be really confident in that approach. I think that's a really good way to, you know, approach that coverage, and obviously be open to covering sports that aren't basketball. But if you're really passionate about basketball, you know, it does show through, I think, when you do those interviews. So that would be my advice, is to just create your niche and to create a something with your coverage that you think isn't being done elsewhere.
Ben?
Thanks. I know we were talking a lot about clips and podcasting earlier. I do a daily podcast on the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm just curious, for like resumes and all that, how would you kind of clip that down? Because I know we talked about like play-by-play, for example. What would you do for podcasting in that scenario?
Well, the first question that I would ask is, what internship are you shooting for? Can we start there? Are you?
Well, I do a lot of podcasting, and then I have my own like site on the Thunder. So I want to be able to cover some form. I mean, I'm not shooting for basketball or anything. I think the main thing for this year, because I am a freshman, I don't really know if I want to go out of state. I will probably apply for some, but the Tulsa World and the Oklahoman are probably up there for me. I think if I could get one of those jobs now, that'd be big. But really anything, if it's a small paper, I just want to have some sort of internship for this summer.
Yeah, so I would, first of all, the papers that you name, a lot of times they probably do not take freshmen, but you still should apply because you want to get on their radar. It may be a situation where they invite you in, so you're not going to get hired this summer. You may get hired next summer. For freshmen, one of the things that I try to tell them is to look for freelance opportunities. Very few organizations give freshmen internships. So look for freelance opportunities during the summer. Or, there are subjects that no one else is touching. Send a note to the sports editor and say, hey, I'm a student, I'm trying to get a few clips for the summer. I have an idea about about a particular story. I would like to talk to you about it. You may get a yes. You may get a yes. In terms of trying to land something out of your state, I always say look for jobs or internships in areas where you have family. Maybe you can stay with them. But many places don't hire freshmen. They normally look at, some hire sophomores, many look at juniors, many look at seniors. But do not let that discourage you. Just look for ways to get published this summer, either from a freelance basis. Talk to your local paper. They just may need someone to, back in the day, I don't know what they're calling it now, but they just may need someone to, we used to say take agate, whatever that job is now in the digital world. They may have some smaller jobs there that they need someone from, they need a college person to do. That may not be what you really want to do, but you got your foot in the door. You get your foot in the door, you do that job, you suggest some stories, try to get published, even as a freshman. If I see clips from a freshman who got published, and I've actually have seen clips from freshmen, you talk about how you stand out, you will stand out because many places do not hire freshmen. So I would just try to just take a shot, see what happens.
Thank you.
Alexis?
Okay, I was still on mute. My second question was just, so I feel like I already have my foot in the door with my current internship. I just wanted some advice on how to possibly impress my editors and get them to want to consider full time.
Oh, the one thing that I would say is, I want you to turn this around for a moment. And I want you to put yourself on the other side. You're the hiring manager. You're your editor. What would be some of the things that would impress you about a candidate? And then you turn it back to you. And one of the things that I say to people, always articulate where you want to go. I remember when I said one time, after being in the business 2 or 3 years, I want to be a sports editor one day. I said that to another sports editor, a prominent sports editor. He laughed. It bothered me a little bit. Later in life, when I became sports editor, I think the reason why he laughed was that he was saying, do you really know what you're getting yourself into? Because I became sports editor of the New York Daily News. And every day you are judged by what's on the back page. If you have something that no one else has, it is a win. If you have something that you have to chase, it is a loss. So always tell people what you would like to be, what you would like to become. And then ask them, you say you already have your foot in the door. Well, there's some people there inside that door who can shed some light on how do you get to the next step. Articulate what you would like to be, and then proceed from there and see what they say. But, you know, I always tell people, you know, act like you belong. You know, when you walk into a newsroom, act like I want that full-time job. I'm going to suggest stories that no one else is working on. I'm going to ask to work on holidays when other people are going to take it off. I'm going to make myself valuable. How can you make yourself valuable now that you got your foot in the door? That will help you stand out and make them want to hire you full time.
Yeah, I think I just want to add on to that really quick, just by saying at an internship, you definitely do more than what they're assigning you. They will assign you things, but they are always, every internship that I've ever done, like they have been completely open when I suggest things. When I say, I really want to write about this, or I really want to do this, can I do this? And they'll be like, yeah, but they just don't have time to come up with, you know, stories for you to write. You have to be proactive about it. I interned at USA Today in 2020. That was during the pandemic. So there was no sports going on for a long time. But in the meetings, we'd have these meetings every morning on Zoom, and I just go on the meetings, and I was often suggesting stories. And I was suggesting, you know, one time I said, I want to write about college spirit squads, like cheerleaders and dance teams, and like what they're doing for the pandemic. And can I write about that? And they were like, yeah, go for it. And I did. I said, I want to help run social media. Can you train me in doing social media? And they were like, yeah, sure. And I was like, you know, pretty much anything that I asked them to do, they let me do. But what they were assigning me was like, do breaking news desk shifts. And I did those or whatever. But the most meaningful work that I did at USA Today was all stuff that I came up with myself. And I said, I want to do this. Can I do it? And they were like, yeah. And then I ended up, they actually had some connections with my current job. And so my current editors asked them about me. And they basically said, yeah, she was in the meetings every day suggesting stories. She was, you know, wanting to do all this extra stuff. She like had all these ideas, and that impressed them. And that was like what stood out, was that, you know, I wasn't just doing the stuff that they assigned me. I was wanting to do other things, and I was wanting to, you know, get extra training and do, you know, I was vocal. Don't be afraid to speak up and to give your ideas. And even if they don't like your idea, they might help you tweak it, or they might say, well, I don't know if that would work, but what about this instead? So that would be like my biggest suggestion.
Any other questions? We're going on almost 2 hours. This has been really great, but we can keep this open as long as you have questions. It's a really good conversation going on in the chat right now too, if you're following along.
I just have a quick question for Mr. Carter. You keep saying you're from Virginia. What part of Virginia are you from?
I'm from a town called South Boston, Virginia. And probably nobody, if you're from, when I say that, people think that you're
from Northern Virginia, isn't it?
No,
that's like by Danville, Virginia.
Oh, that's out west.
There you go. It's between Danville and Lynchburg. If you want a point of reference, it's probably a little bit an hour from Greensboro. Because sometimes I fly into I fly into Durham, to the Durham airport, then I drive home. I can get home in about a little bit more than an hour. And probably the closest big city it is to in Virginia is Richmond. And that's about 2 hours from Richmond, Virginia. But it has a town of 40,000, and it has 2 newspapers and 2 radio stations. And which I just find remarkable that all these years, the town supports 2 newspapers.
Yeah, I'm from the 757. I'm out from Chesapeake, South Norfolk. So it's.
Yes, I will probably be in that area this week. Norfolk State plays Hampton That's a big game. So, you know, A&T is not around, so I would probably be there this
Yeah,
week.
we play Hampton in a couple at the end of October, so maybe you go out there.
Okay. Very good.
Then I see your hand raised. Is that a new question or is that from the previous question?
Oh, yeah, I have a new question.
Okay.
I think whenever there was a question going on, David mentioned like being able to break news stories is kind of like a big deal. I've broken one at this point. It was like a G League story. But I didn't really get like a long-term connection out of it to where you can continuously just like break stories over and over again. My question to you guys is, how are you able to establish those sorts of relationships to where you can start breaking news like at a consistent basis?
So I think that this can depend on your college a lot. So I went to Michigan. Michigan is, first of all, there's like a ton of reporters on the football beat, and a lot of them have been doing it since like the 1990s. And also at Michigan, it was basically impossible to get the football beat until you were a junior. So people did it for a minimum or a maximum of 2 years. And also Michigan is not like Jim Harbaugh doesn't like to talk. So the combination of those three things meant that in order to break a football story, you basically had to be lucky. You had to like be at Chipotle and see a player with a boot on their leg or something. You know, breaking news sometimes, especially in these college, like it can be about luck, but that doesn't mean that you can't develop relationships. Because for instance, you know, I had some connections at Michigan with various programs, including some non-revenue sports. I had some alumni that I talked to. I talked to Denard Robinson for a story, so I have his number now. I told you, or I said in the chat at one point, when I covered the Cape Cod Baseball League over the summer, I got a bunch of connections in college baseball that I didn't think I would ever use. And then I got hired to cover Vanderbilt. And that's a big baseball school. So I like texted some of the Cape League coaches I knew. I was like, hey, like, let's talk about Vanderbilt. And they were like, sure, we love Vanderbilt. And I'm like, okay. So anything you might have for an internship at all, like any kind of, you know, always get somebody's number. If you're writing feature on somebody, if you talk to somebody one-on-one, just like get their number, make sure you have it. Even if you're not quite at the point that you can be breaking news, because again, like I said, that can depend on the situation. In some cases, you know, you can have those relationships and they will ask you about developing relationships, and you can just tell them, well, this is what I did. This is, you know, who I might have had relationships with. I had a relationship with a dance team coach. Like, so sometime when COVID was going on, I'd text her sometimes. I'd be like, so like, is the dance team going to be able to be at games this year? And they would be like, and she'd be like, we don't know. And I'd be like, well, like that they don't even know what's going on. And that was tangentially related to football, even though I couldn't really get an in with the football program specifically. Or, you know, if you have a class with somebody, they say something in class, like just pay attention to that kind of stuff. But I think that you can have relationships, even if the opportunities to break a major story aren't 100% there.
You know, I would just like to add some of the biggest news breakers today, they basically started exactly what Aria just said. You write a story, you build a relationship, you make sure you get their number, make sure you check in, you know, and I'm not going to call any names, but I know one big news breaker who actually checks in with all his sources through the course of 7 days. And he asks, what's going on with your team? And sometimes that leads to a breaking news story. What you don't want to do is to not build a relationship and then you hear something and then you pick up the phone and you call someone, they may not answer you. So sometimes it starts with a story. You know, I know people who say, for example, subject A, they do a nice piece, they stay in contact with subject A, they find something personable about subject A, say, for example, they check their social media page and they see that the person is celebrating his 10th wedding anniversary. So they send a nice note. Personal touch. I've talked about that earlier. People pay attention to those things. You then begin to build a relationship. And then in the course of talking, sometimes a breaking news story, you go in checking on one thing, and then you hear about something, and then it turns out to be a big story. I mean, I remember when A-Rod came to the Yankees, another paper broke it. That was because somebody saw him walking in New York City and began asking questions, from what I understand. Breaking news is not easy. You have to work at it. You have to build your sources. And once you do that, sometimes the story comes to you. But it's all about building relationships. And it starts right there on your college campus. It starts right there. And you should never leave an interview without asking for someone's contact information, no matter who it is, and just start building up your Rolodex. As students now, because we talked about the passion. I've heard you articulate some of the passion on this call. I would say that many of you should already have a pretty decent Rolodex, or we don't say that anymore, but a contact list at this particular point, just based on the people that you already have spoken to.
Alexis, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, it was raised, but I put it down. I was actually going to say that exact thing, just that throughout my internship, I was just going to suggest to the group making an Excel sheet of everybody that you meet, their emails, their contacts, but I see that's already been said. But yeah, I was just going to suggest, because when some people, in our generation hear Rolodex, they're like, what is that? But for me, just having having the Microsoft Excel app on my phone, and just anytime I meet somebody, just adding that in there. So for me, I got denied for every internship except for the one that I have now. But even though I did get denied, the people that interviewed me in the past, reaching back out to them for full-time employment towards the end of my senior year, now that they've seen that I have worked for a big paper, it makes myself just a little bit more marketable to reach back to them and say, hey, I'm looking for full employment, et cetera.
And Alexis, and I don't know if we heard what school you went to. Did we hear that earlier?
So I go to North Carolina A&T. I'm a senior multimedia journalism student at North Carolina A&T.
So you're also, we have quite a few Aggies, and we certainly do welcome you, because I think you guys are the most recent APSE chapter. So we're proud to have you in the group. The one thing that I would say, Alexis, is do not be afraid to take another internship after you graduate if a full-time job isn't available. Many seniors have actually taken an internship that has led to a full-time job. So yes, you want to get a full-time job. Sometimes you can take an internship and you have to leave. We've had students in SJI who were on internships this summer, and a full-time offer became available, and they ended up taking it with 1 month left to go into the internship. So don't think that you can't take another internship if a full-time job isn't available.
Well, yeah, I would definitely say I'm definitely open to an internship, even if, where I'm at currently, if another section or another sector has an internship opening, moving around in-house, I won't be discouraged if, they don't offer me full-time. But if an internship, in another area under the same umbrella opens up, then it's like I'm still around, I'm still doing good work, so that my name is still fresh if those full-time positions remain open.
Mm-hmm. Good, very good.
I want to read one question from the chat from Adam.
Oh, I was just going to answer that.
Thank you.
Adam basically asked about the difference between big market and small market internships, and whether you should be trying for, a big market internship. And I say this as somebody who did both a small market paper and I interned at a national publication. Those types of internships are extremely different and can lead to different opportunities. I personally think an internship at a small paper is extremely valuable because sometimes you can get more opportunities actually than you can at a larger name. Because when I worked at the Cape Cod Times, that was a paper, their full-time sports staff at that time, this is in 2019, was I think 3, it might have been 4, but they laid one of them off at the end of the summer. So it was a very small staff and they hired me because they basically wanted somebody that could be temporary just for the summer. And so they put me covering the Cape Cod Baseball League beat. So I was covering my own beat at an internship. You usually don't do that at larger internships. They have you doing like breaking news and stuff like that. But I was getting professional experience with beat writing. I had a specific number of game stories that I was supposed to write every week. I was writing one feature story every week. I was writing a notebook every week. I was having to cover multiple teams, which is something that's really valuable, especially if you're interested in like high school sports and things like that. I was, you know, in a lot of contact with a lot of college coaches because I was covering college baseball, and just like covering all the narratives. I hosted a podcast. Like I was doing everything at that internship. Like I did so much stuff and it really helped me to gain a lot of confidence and experience in beat writing. And beat writing is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a beat writer. So gaining that experience was extremely valuable for me. Now, I also really enjoyed my internship at USA Today. I was able to write a lot of feature stories. I was able to do a lot of like social media and multimedia. I helped out on investigative work. And so, you know, I think that there's a lot of value in doing any kind of internship, but do not feel pressured into getting a large market or big name internship, because the smaller internships can be just as valuable in terms of the types of clips that you can get. And they can be extremely valuable in the types of experience that you can get. And never assume that you're, you know, that an internship is beneath you, or that, you know, I think that there's a lot of value to be gained from working at a small paper as well, especially because I think it was Leon who said this, that, you know, a lot of times when you get your first job, it's not going to be at a large paper, it's going to be at a small paper. And so seeing how a small paper works, we had to do, the Cape Cod Times was like print focused, which is not very uncommon these days, but like they were print focused. I had to have my print deadlines. I had to write my story, like the way that our deadlines worked. Like I was writing a story on such a strict deadline that I literally had time to, I would write my instant gamer, had to be done before the game ended, go and get the quotes, had to throw the quotes into the story within like 10, 20 minutes. So I got that experience, like extreme deadline writing, and that's still valuable to people, even at, you know, in a more digitally focused world. And so I think there's just a lot of skills that you can learn from a small market internship. And again, it's about knowing how to sell it too. When you do an interview and you can say, well, I had experience doing these things at the Cape Cod Times. I did beat writing, I did podcasts, I was writing features, I was writing on strict deadlines. If you can list out all the things that you did, all the things that you learned, the clips that you got, you know, I developed relationships with X and Y college coaches. I actually ended up, we were doing a college baseball story at USA Today during my internship. There was some news that had broke about college baseball, and I had the phone numbers of like some SEC baseball coaches from players that had played on the Cape. And they were like, hey, Aria, like text Paul Mainieri and ask him, like, can you confirm this thing, and ask him what he thinks about it. So I did. And like, I co-bylined this story about like this college base, like you would be surprised is what I'm saying. Like, that stuff comes in handy, and it just, yeah, again, like I think that you should cast a wide net, and certainly I don't think that I think that if an opportunity comes to do a small market internship, then you should take it, and it's not lesser than, that's really important. It's not lesser than a large market internship. They're completely different opportunities. You do different things. It's fine to do both. It's fine to, you know, do one or the other, but there's so many valuable things that you can gain from doing a small market internship.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
I'll just add that you can win awards at these small market internships and make a big time name for yourself when you win these APSE awards.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I just, you've heard some great wisdom tonight. Aria, Leon, thank you so much for giving us your time tonight. This has been great. Also want to thank the other editors on the call for their contributions, Jake, David, Nyla, and Gary, who had to drop. Thank you so much for this. And I'll just close with saying, we've heard a lot of great advice, but something we kept coming back to was cover letters. And as someone who's hired interns, I can tell you for sure that you get a stack of resumes, but a cover letter is going to be the thing that's going to make an editor call you in for an interview. And I've hired interns based on the cover letter. I had the interview, everything I kind of felt from that cover letter kept rang true. When we had the interview, I ended up hiring interns because of cover letters. And it made me think just how bad my cover letters were when I was applying for jobs and stuff, because it was kind of an afterthought to me. I focused so much on the resume, which you should, that I just kind of typed a quick cover letter, and they were horrible. Reading some of the great cover letters that I got from students kind of put mine to shame. So definitely take some time on that cover letter, because it could be the difference and makes you stand out in the sea of resumes. Definitely do that. Another thing I want to say, we've talked about what you can do to kind of help that organization and what you can bring to the coverage. Don't be afraid to talk about what that organization is doing and what possibly they could be doing better. Because I'll tell you, I hired an intern once who came, we met for lunch, had his clip package, had his resume, and he handed me a 5-page critique of my website. I was at the Buffalo News, and I thought he handed me that, and I was like, I don't know whether to be insulted or really impressed right now. I landed on the side of impressed, and he ended up getting the internship that year. But that showed me that he's really paying attention to what we do and that he really wants this internship. So definitely know where you're working, where you want to work, what they do well, maybe what they can also do better, and what you can help. It just kind of shows some initiative that you're really paying attention and that you have some really good ideas. I see Aaron, your hand's raised.
Yeah, I actually forgot to mention this. This is my original question. I'm not really familiar with what goes into a cover letter. So you guys, we've obviously been talking about it throughout this Zoom call. So could you go into a little bit what goes into a cover letter and what makes that specific cover letter stand out compared to other people's?
Well, I'm gonna have Aria take this because she does have a section on this in her guide, but I'm gonna tell you the thing that really, the personal stories everyone was talking about. I can't tell you how much that makes me sit there and pay attention to you. If you kind of tell me a story about yourself, and sometimes it doesn't have to be an elaborate story. It can kind of be, why you wanted to get into journalism, that kind of thing. It could be that. It can be a personal story if you have it. I've had an intern who gave me a cover letter that his father was sick, and that when he would go out to games, his father would tell him, when you go to this game, write what I couldn't see on TV. And he said it was the best journalism advice he'd ever gotten, and he uses it to this day. I called him in, he got the job, because that just really stood out. It's like, wow, you hear those stories and kind of what motivates people. That's really good advice. I think a personal story, or if you have it, but essentially you definitely want to let the organization know what you can bring to that organization and how you can improve that coverage. I'm gonna let Aria pick up from there.
Yeah, so I agree a lot with what Lisa said. I think the most impactful advice that I ever got on cover letters was somebody who told me, you're telling the story of your journalism career. What is your lead? And to build on that, I think you literally just approach it. This is what I've told people who ask me about this. Approach it as if you are writing a feature about your journalism career. What is your lead? What is your nut graph? You start your lead. I usually start with an anecdote. I had several different anecdotes that I used in various cover letters, but it was usually, so the first thing that I would do is I'd come up with an angle. What is my specific thing that I bring to the table? So for me, that was, I've said several times, I love beat writing. I really wanted to do beat writing professionally, but I have a very specific approach to beat writing. Rather than being more on the breaking news end of beat writing. I was more on the enterprise feature side. I really love to do that kind of thing. And a lot of my work that I did was like finding stories that nobody else was telling within the context of a beat, using the relationships that I developed on the beat to tell deeper stories. So that was what I based my entire cover letter on. I started with a personal anecdote that exemplified how I approach beat coverage. For instance, one of the times was like, one of the anecdotes that I used was I was at March Madness in 2019. I was covering Michigan, or no, it wasn't March Madness. It was the Big Ten tournament. I was covering Michigan versus Michigan State in basketball. And the game had just ended. Michigan State beat Michigan. Was eating some chicken nuggets, chicken tenders in the hallway along with like some other writers. And I wanted to go to the Michigan State locker room. And I asked a beat writer saying, I was like, when does the Michigan State locker room open? And he's like, oh, it's open right now. So I literally dropped my chicken nuggets on the floor. I abandoned them. I ran down the hallway in high heels to the Michigan State locker room. I went into their locker room. I came back. I went into Michigan's locker room. I completely even missed. I had asked when I walked into Michigan's locker room, where is Michigan going in March Madness and who are they playing? Because I missed the entire selection show because I went to Michigan State's locker room. But I was like the only person that was there who had like gone to both. And so I used that anecdote as like a way of, demonstrating my in-depth beat coverage and my dedication to, being willing to do anything to, get to report these stories. And so once you do the anecdote, the next thing you do is basically just say, that's just one, like I would just have kind of this sentence. That's just one example of how, I would, approach beat coverage by trying to tell unique and in-depth stories or things like that. And then I would go into another, like, I've had experience covering this or that, or working for this or that publication. And then after that, you go into, okay, here's where I'm applying. Here's why I want to work there. That's what I can bring to this publication. And then after that, I always end a cover letter, thank you for your consideration. And so that's really just how I did it. It's like I said, you just structure it like a story, like you're writing a feature. That's always the way that that was kind of how I was told to do it. And that's how I've always done it. And I think that has worked out really effectively for me, because again, a lot of people mentioned, a lot of people have similar experiences. Like you're not the only person who's covered football or basketball or high school sports or whatever it is that you've covered. Lots of people have covered that. Lots of people have had X or Y internship or whatever. What nobody else that is applying for this internship has is your specific personal experiences and stories. And what nobody else has is, other people that are applying are not necessarily going to have your same approach or your same strengths. And so if you can hone in on that and say, this is my strength, this is what I really bring to the table, and hammer that in your cover letter, hammer that in your clips should exemplify what you said in your cover letter. If you said, I do feature-based beat coverage, that's what I always did. I sent game stories, but I would send those features that I wrote on my beats. I would send those features that I mentioned in my cover letter. I sent them as clips. You have to let them see what you're talking about. So all of it is just this one package, and you kind of combine it together to really drive home the point that you are a journalist who brings X or Y thing to the table. That's always how I approached it. And I think it really helps to get in that mindset of like, you're writing a feature about yourself.
Thank you so much. And also, so how long is the cover letter usually?
So mine was a few hundred words, I think usually 300 to 400 words. Sometimes they want them a little bit longer depending on the application for the specific thing that you're applying for. So look and see if they have any specific like things that they're wanting. But I used a template for mine. So I would just have I would literally just write like what fit into the one page on my template, which was, like I said, about 350 words. I tried not to make it too long. But again, if they are looking for something specific, sometimes they say like they want 500 words. or like a personal statement or something like that, you know, then obviously make it longer.
Mhm. And you would write a cover letter for each internship, right? Even if they don't necessarily ask specifically for one?
I
Not
I don't think yes, I would send a cover letter to every internship unless like the application literally like didn't have a place to send one. But I think that every place I applied for wanted a cover letter. There might have been like one that didn't. But yes, and you obviously like, again, so something that I also make sure to do, I'm just gonna add this, always with your cover letters. So because I used a template in terms of the formatting on it, I would have one template and I would always update it in the template for each internship that I was doing. And I would hit save as, and I would save it as name of publication cover letter. You want to make sure to do that so that you do not send the wrong cover letter to a publication. Because I've heard so many places that are like, oh yeah, well, like the person was applying for a job at like the Washington Post and they sent a cover letter for the New York Times. Make sure you don't do that. Make sure you save every cover letter separately. Save it with the name of the publication. Sometimes they give you specific instructions of like when they want it sent in a way that's like has your name in it or something. So you can change it later, but make sure you save it as the name of the publication so that when you go and you're putting together your application, you do not use the wrong one. Make sure you double check that you're sending the right cover letter. Yes, I agree with what Jake just said. Always save your resume and cover letters and clips as PDFs. A lot of times they want you to combine it into one like file, and it's way easier to do that with PDFs. Your formatting on your resume and cover letter, if you use a template like on Microsoft Word or something, it can get messed up if you do not save it as a PDF. So save it as a PDF. You know that the person will be able to open it if you save it as a PDF. So yes, I agree with that. Always save as a PDF. Your clips also you should save as PDFs, because sometimes like if you're, especially if the publication has a paywall or if it has like a ton of ads or if it's just like hard to navigate or like just like you can go to the page that your clip is on, you just click file print. And then instead of printing to a printer, you just click like save as PDF. And I had a folder on my computer called clips. And I just saved every story that I thought I could possibly use as a clip. I saved them in folders, gamers, sidebars, features, you know, whatever. And so then based on how many clips that publication wanted, I would just go in there and choose. And this is way off the topic of cover letters, but yeah, make sure you stay organized. That's just what I'm saying. Like, make sure you're not sending the wrong stuff to the wrong place. Like, make sure you double check, make sure you proofread, make sure your phone number and your contact info is correct on your cover letter, because I've actually made that mistake before. Don't do that. Make sure everything's spelled right. Make sure you're sending the right cover letter to the right publication. Like, do not make those mistakes, because like your application will get thrown in the trash so fast.
And I have thrown a few in the trash based on that. You can always tell a form cover letter. So one person told me, and this is actually pretty good advice, focus on one cover letter a day. So if you're writing for paper or publication a cover letter to publication A, focus on that one today. Tomorrow, focus on another one. Do not try to send out 10 in one day, because you will, say, for example, you know, I've gotten cover letters addressed to me and the paper was wrong and things like that. And it went into the trash can, because I know how, you know, we all, you know, you call up the cover letter, you change the address and you and you hit send or you mail. Focus on one cover letter a day. If you are applying to 10 internships, use the next 10 days and just work it into your schedule, because Aria is right. Many people have made that mistake with cover letters, and they do go into the trash can.
Can I get off mute? I was like clicking, trying to get off mute. All right, well, thanks so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Again, Leon, Aria, thank you so much for hanging in there with us. Really appreciate all the questions. We'll be doing something like this monthly, either a guest speaker or for some kind of session. So stay tuned, we'll keep you all posted about that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank y'all
guys.
so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
So much.
Good luck, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.